You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Hristodoulou, and today we once again are making picks, this time for Week 11 in the NFL. I'm currently sitting on a 92-58 record, coming off of a 7-7 week. Not a great one, not a bad one. You obviously always want to be above 500, but I'll take splitting even after a pretty sick 25-5 run. But we have an excellent week of games, probably the best primetime matchups we've gotten on both Thursday night and Monday Night Football. So plenty to be excited about, plenty to discuss. Let me hear your picks in the comment section down below. I don't do betting odds, but I'd love to hear your betting odds and betting favorites here. I'm always interested in what you all are looking at. But let's dive right in, starting with Thursday Night Football, AFC North divisional matchup here as the Cincinnati Bengals and Baltimore Ravens go head-to-head in Baltimore. This is a tight one here because when you look at the way these two teams match up, there are some significant injuries to keep an eye on for both of these teams, as the Bengals are going to be missing both Sam Hubbard and T. Higgins, with a couple other wide receivers questionable as well, so wide receiver room could be thin for Cincinnati. And then on Baltimore's end, Ronnie Staley's already listed as out. Trenton Simpson's another guy that they are going to be missing on defense, and then some questionables here in the secondary with Marlon Humphrey and Dalen Worley, also John Simpson and Kyle Van Noy, who's been a really good piece in addition to that defense over there in Baltimore. Both these teams are in a bit of a tough spot as well, coming off some really tough losses last week. I think when I look at this game, though, it really is going to come down to turnovers here, and it could be a very significant deciding factor in this game because I expect this contest to be pretty tight here. When you look at what Cincinnati's defense is averaging right now, they're at about 2 turnovers a game to Baltimore's offensive average of about a turnover and a half a game. So if Cincinnati's opportunistic, they could come into Baltimore and potentially pull off that upset win. However, Baltimore loves to run the football, and I think that there is an opportunity for them to take it to Cincinnati because their run defense is not great over there. They're 30th in the NFL, allowing about 136 yards per game, as Baltimore boasts the best rushing attack, averaging 154 yards a game. So if the Bengals want to come out victorious in Baltimore for this matchup here, I think they need to try to find success on the ground. They're the league's worst rushing attack at only just 74 yards a game. They need to find some more balance to the offense, especially with the potential very thin wide receiver corps. And on top of that, I think that they need to try and force a mistake or two. That's basically how Baltimore wound up giving away the game to Cleveland last week. So if Cincinnati wants to win, they've got to protect the football and force Baltimore into making some mistakes, which they have been somewhat prone to already doing. However, I'm leaning more towards Baltimore in this matchup here. On a short week, I feel like home team, when two good teams are playing, does have a little bit of an edge in this matchup here. It benefits them. And on top of that, like I said, the bread and butter of Baltimore really is running the football. And Keaton Mitchell is starting to rise up to the occasion now. And I think that we might see Lamar Jackson even get a little run happy in this game here. I think the Ravens come away with a tight victory, 27-24. Nothing crazy, but a really good contest with a slight edge to the home team in this one. Now, moving into the early window of games here as we flip over to Sunday, we're going to stay in the AFC North as the Pittsburgh Steelers take on the Cleveland Browns. Now, this one here, we have two really tough defenses in what should be a gritty matchup. Browns, as it was mentioned earlier this week, no Deshaun Watson. He's done for the season. Fracture in his shoulder has ended his year, and he'll be getting surgery to repair it. Not to mention Wyatt Teller and DeJuan Jones are also questionable for this matchup. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome. So you have offensive linemen there. You have some key guys in the secondary. Juan Thornhill's another one, and then also Ogbo Okoronkwo is on there as well. There are some significant names to be worth mentioning in Cleveland as far as the injury report is concerned, and even on the Pittsburgh side as well. Deontay Johnson's questionable after just coming back. Minka Fitzpatrick's still questionable. Cam Hayward, Montravius Adams. So there's some guys on the defense that I think are worth mentioning here. Both these defenses, like I said, really good, especially at keeping opponents out of the end zone. When you look at the numbers here, Pittsburgh is 11th in terms of points allowed per game to Cleveland's 6th, and they're sitting both at about a 1-point margin in terms of difference. You have 19 points a game roughly for Cleveland. You have 20 points a game roughly for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So as far as defense is concerned, there are two units. However, I will say that Pittsburgh is a bit prone to letting teams move the football a little bit more, but they are a top 5 red zone defense. So when teams move a lot, yes, they get close to the red zone, but they don't necessarily score touchdowns when they get into the red zone, which has kind of been the key to the success of this Pittsburgh Steelers team, because we know the offense has not been great. And when you've looked at what Cleveland has done this year, they themselves have also not been great. They have a fair amount of points, especially recently with some games that have gone their way, but they're 11th in the NFL in scoring, and I feel like that number is a little bit deceivingly high just because of a couple of matchups with the Colts and then their game last week against the Ravens. It doesn't actually reflect what their offensive output has been, especially now that we're going to lose Deshaun Watson in Cleveland again. I assume that number is going to regress a bit back to about the middle of the NFL as opposed to being closer to the top half. The other thing is, obviously, as far as quarterback is concerned, PJ Walker and/or Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I'm assuming PJ Walker's probably going to get the start in this matchup here. How are they going to handle Pittsburgh's defense? And on top of that, handle Pittsburgh's opportunistic defense. They currently lead the league in forced turnovers with 2 a game. So that means you're looking at turning the football over at least twice in this matchup here. And why do I say that? Because Cleveland's averaging about 2 turnovers a game themselves. So we're probably going to see at least 2 turnovers from Cleveland just based off what the numbers are telling us. They are going to need to lean into their run game very heavily if they want to find success, which, to be fair, is a bit of a weakness for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They allow about 130 yards a game, so there is opportunities for both these teams to win. However, I will say that we've been seeing some growth and progression from the offensive line in Pittsburgh. They obviously have opted to make Jalen Warren the starter over Najee Harris going forward, so that adds a little bit more of a wrinkle to the way this offense is operating. And I think that with the uncertainty now at quarterback in Cleveland, we already see the Pittsburgh Steelers beat them once. And that was, I believe, with Deshaun Watson under center, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. My memory might be a little bit fuzzy there. But they did lose Nick Chubb in that same game and then ultimately fell to the Steelers. So I think I'm still erring on the side of Pittsburgh in this matchup as well, but it's a very tight contest, one that I'm not super confident on. I'll take Pittsburgh 20-19. This is one that if you're somebody that likes to bet, I would stay away from because I don't really know if there is a very clear favorite. Even with the Browns missing their starting quarterback, that defense has kept them in every single game this season for the most part. Looking at Chicago and Detroit, we have an AFC North clash between the Lions sitting at 7-2 and the Chicago Bears sitting at 3-1. We have 2 teams that love to run the football, but also 2 teams that can defend against the run as well. When you look at the numbers here, Chicago, 135 yards a game, good for 5th best in the NFL. Right in front of them at 4th is the Detroit Lions with 139 yards per game on the ground. But then when you look at the defenses, again, the numbers pretty much match up fairly evenly. Bears are allowing only 76 yards per game, which is good for 2nd best in the NFL on the ground. The Lions are right behind them at 79, 3rd best in the NFL. So we get Justin Fields back. We have 2 teams that love to run the football, but I will say this, there's a big discrepancy there. Detroit can throw the football with the best of them, as we've seen through the entire season here, and I think that is going to be the big question for Chicago is, can this offense keep up with the Lions if they start rolling and start taking advantage of what's a pretty porous secondary and just passing defense altogether over there in Chicago? I'm not quite sure that they can. If Chicago wants to win this game, they've got to find some sort of success with Justin Fields throwing the football. I know that they can run the football successfully, but like I said, Detroit run D is no slouch by any means. And in this day and age, you're not really winning many games just strictly grounding and pounding your way to victory. There are some teams that can get away from that. Eagles might be a good example of it, and hell, even the Lions at times can be a good example of it, but they are amongst the best teams in the NFL when it comes to doing that. The passing attack has to find success, and when you look at the Lions, they do let teams move. 231 yards a game puts them at 20th in the NFL, but I'm not quite sure that this Chicago team is going to be able to get the job done, especially with the game being in Detroit. I'm favoring the Lions. I have them winning 27-20, so give me the Detroit victory, moving on to 8-2 as they further their lead in the NFC North. Now, the next game that we're going to look at here is the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Green Bay Packers, this one being in Green Bay. And I've got to say, the Chargers lucked out because they're going to have some pretty decent weather for this. Sunny and close to 50 degrees, the best you could ask for at the midpoint in November. Not a very cold game, especially for a team coming from California. You always love to see some good weather in those colder climates. Now, when you look at these two teams and the way they match up here, you have two teams on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as points allowed on defense and as far as the scoring is concerned on offense. The Chargers right now have the 7th best scoring offense in the NFL to the Packers' 21st. That's a whole 14-team difference right there. And then as far as points allowed per game go, Chargers are sitting at 24th with the Packers sitting at 11th. So about a 13-team difference there. Both these teams live and die on opposite ends of the spectrum. One is by their defense, the other one is by their offense here. I think a big question that I have for the Green Bay Packers going into this one here is if they can slow down the Chargers passing attack, because I don't quite know if they can. They've been a really good unit for the most part this season. They are 7th best in the NFL, but this is an offense that, again, loves to move the football through the air. They're averaging about 250 yards a game through the air, to be precise, if you're talking the LA Chargers here. And with that in mind, the passing attack that we've seen from Green Bay has been anything but stellar. However, if there is a team to be facing to have kind of a rise to the occasion type of game for the offense as far as passing the football goes, the Chargers defense is the defense to have that game against. They are the worst passing defense in the NFL as far as yardage is concerned. They allow nearly 300 yards a game, sitting at 291. So if there was ever a time for Green Bay to maybe figure some things out, this would be the game. A good matchup to watch here, though, and one that I'll be very curious about, is how this Los Angeles Chargers pass rush, which is tied for 2nd in the NFL in terms of sacks per game, handles a Green Bay pass protection that is about 7th in the NFL as far as sacks per game allowed goes. I think depending on how that battle is won and lost, ultimately kind of determines how this game shakes out. You either get like a very high scoring affair as both offenses are just moving a lot because the rush isn't getting there from the Chargers and Green Bay's holding up, or you get a game that maybe is a little bit lower scoring affair because the Chargers won't feel as forced to throw the football as much and the game becomes a little bit more balanced as far as offensive goes, and you get something along the lines of like a 23-20 game, which I have the Chargers coming out victorious in. Like I said, I think getting a really good weather game in Green Bay benefits the Chargers big time here. Sunny, nearly 50 degrees, not bad to have in Green Bay as a road warrior trying to find yourself a victory to get yourself back to 500. The next game that we're looking at here is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Miami Dolphins here. We have a Raiders team riding an all-time high under interim head coach Antonio Pierce, going up against a Miami Dolphins team that has yet to lose at home and has been able to score a litany of points at will this season, depending on their opponents. When you look at this matchup, and two things that I think are really going to decide this game is going to be, one, just how successful can Miami be against the Raiders passing defense that's been actually surprisingly good despite the issues they've had this year, and the second thing being, how does Las Vegas's run defense handle Miami's ground attack? Those two things stand out to me because, one, like I said, the Raiders are allowing under 200 yards a game through the air, which is surprisingly low, but not so surprisingly when you consider what their pass rush has been able to do as far as disrupting offenses go. And secondly, when you look at that run defense, when they've had their success, again, defending the pass for all that it's been, they can't really seem to stop a nosebleed on the ground. And Miami, if they can't pass the football, they can certainly run the football. They have the most yards per game through the air right now, and then the second most yards per game on the ground. So they really are like a 1-2 punch combination as far as offense is concerned, where if one thing's not working, you can always lean on the other. So it's really going to come down to, can this pass defense continue to be as good as it's been in Las Vegas, and are they going to be able to slow down the run game if they're finding success against the pass and not be a porous group like they have been? I think really, though, the biggest key for Las Vegas is kind of like two things, but if Las Vegas wants to come away victorious as a road dog against a Miami team that has yet to lose at home, the first thing is you have to, one, make zero mistakes. Do not give the Miami Dolphins offense any more opportunities than they're already going to get in this game here. You can't be turning the football over. The second thing is keeping the football away from Miami in general. You need to have long, sustained drives because Miami can't score if they don't have the football. I think that's one thing that we've seen some teams get into issues with is like you can't 3 and out against the Miami Dolphins, because if you're giving it right back to the offense, your defense is going to be more gassed, and you're not going to you're not going to find success. That's where Miami really starts to beat teams, especially at home. For those of you that aren't aware, Miami's stadium, the way it's designed, is designed very specifically so that the opposing team sits in the sun the entire game. You're cooking on the sideline, and when you're playing, you're not really getting much break there either because you're exerting yourself. You're on the football field. There is a lot that goes into Miami's success at home, especially with the way they renovated Miami's stadium, the way Hard Rock is now. So keep the football away from them. You need long, sustained drives. Allow your defense to try and rest as much as possible while they're baking in that Florida sun. Even in November, it's still somewhat hot there. I don't know what the weather's going to be this week, but that always is a factor. Even though some people try to say that it's not, you can look up plenty of interviews. I think one recently was Kyle Van Noy, or it was either him or Rob Ninkovich, two guys on the Patriots. They talked about just how difficult it is to play in Miami because of that sun factor. You're just sitting there cooking in the sun, especially earlier in the season more than anything. But we're still at a point where it can be warm in Florida. And again, they're closer to the equator, direct sunlight. It's a real factor. There's a reason Miami's 4-0 at home and their losses are coming in away games here. It's not just a coincidence. However, I am going to go Miami in this game. All that being said, I think the Dolphins are the better team in this matchup here. Again, they are undefeated at home. I saw that the spread for this one is currently minus 13.5 for Miami. I think that number is a little bit high. Never underestimate a team that is bought into what their coach is doing, especially in the situation that the Raiders are in and are riding big momentum going into a matchup here. Momentum is everything in the NFL. I don't know if some people believe in it or not, but there are swings in games, and I've heard players talk about it in interviews as well. It is real, very real. And right now, the Raiders, even if they don't win this game, I think can come in and be competitive. It's not like the Miami's Dolphins defense has been some world beater by any means. They've been average at best and sometimes a below average when they're playing at their worst. So I think the Dolphins win, but a closer contest than some people are probably anticipating. 28-21, give it to Miami. Now we look at the New York Giants and Washington Commanders here. We have a Giants team that comes in battered and bruised, literally and figuratively. This team is hurt in every way, shape, or form, whether it's player-wise, ego-wise, emotionally, I mean, you name it, and the Giants are hurting in that fashion. They also come in, Adoree Jackson is listed as questionable, Kayvon Thibodeau, Bobby Okereke, Xavier McKinney, Saquon Barkley, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and I mean, the Washington comes in with a couple of guys questionable, but not nearly the list that we're looking at as far as the Giants are concerned here. Tommy DeVito appears to be QB1, at least for now. Matt Barkley is the guy that sits behind him. I don't really sit there and look at either of those names and find anything too threatening about the both of them. It feels like Tommy DeVito is struggling a little bit when it comes to dealing with pressure and seeing guys. And I don't really think the offensive line is helping too much in New York on top of that when you consider that they are the worst team in the NFL when it comes to allowing sacks per game at 5.4, excuse me. And it's a bit concerning. I don't really know how the Giants find a way to win this game, all things considered right now. But when you look back to the first matchup between these two teams, the defense did give Washington fits for whatever that reason may be. And maybe it's because Washington sits right behind the Giants as far as sacks per game are allowed with over 4.5 a game. But I will say that I think that this game winds up being a little bit different. I could see the Giants keeping up a fight, but I do expect the Commanders to take the victory in this one here, and I am going to take them 17-13. I think we get a lower scoring affair. I feel like some of that strength from the defense does kind of roll itself over into the second matchup here against the Commanders from the Giants side, but ultimately, Washington is the better team on paper and as far as how they've played this year, and they should be winning this game, especially with it being in Washington, the first game being in New York. Maybe that had something to do with it, but Washington should be winning this matchup here. The next game that we're looking at here is the Dallas Cowboys and Carolina Panthers. I will say this, it's a trap game, and a trap game nonetheless for Dallas. You have to come in this game ready to play. I don't want to see Dallas come in here, turn over the first drive, let Carolina have some life to breathe, and you know, it end up being a wonky start. Dallas needs to come in and just wipe the floor, start to finish, as they have done to some of their lesser opponents this week. These teams are on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Dallas is top 5 in offensive and defensive scoring to the bottom 5 of Carolina's. And when you look at all the numbers, I mean, Dallas pretty much leads Carolina in every single statistic. This game, again, could be a little bit closer if Dallas comes out sleepwalking and is not prepared to play the Panthers. Again, it is a trap game, and we see teams fall to that all the time. But this is a Dallas victory. I have them winning 34-10. It should be another massive windfall for them as they beat a far lesser opponent. If they lose, wow, that's all I've got to say if they lose. Next game, diving into the Tennessee Titans and Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars at home, only 2-3. However, Titans come in, they're 0-5 on the road. They have yet to win a game not in Tennessee, and I do think that poses a bit of an issue for where they are right now. But Jacksonville, all 3 of their losses have come at home. They have not lost a game on the road this season, but they lose at home for whatever that reason may be. Jacksonville's run defense could pose an issue for Tennessee. I feel like right now with a rookie quarterback at the helm, you want to be able to lean into your running attack, but for whatever the reason is, and it's probably regression more than anything else, we're not getting the same type of push, forcefulness, and explosiveness from the run game out of Tennessee, which has kind of been their bread and butter for the last 3 or 4 years. And I do think that winds up being a problem for the Titans, because then you have to lean on rookie quarterback Will Levis a little bit more. And while I'm not saying you don't want to do that, it's better if you don't have to lean completely on your rookie quarterback, especially so early into the start of his career. However, there is a chance that Will Levis has an opportunity to kind of have a get-right game against Jacksonville. For what it's worth, they are allowing 266 yards a game through the air, which is 30th in the NFL. So it's not like Jacksonville is some lockdown defense through the air. Their strength really comes from being able to stop the run and then force teams to kind of be one-dimensional. They're coming off of a shellacking against the 49ers last week, so that is also something that they're probably rolling around in their heads. But this is a game that I feel like Jacksonville should be able to win. Maybe not necessarily comfortably because it's a divisional game. Sometimes these games end up closer than they probably should be. It's just kind of how things work in the NFL. But one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on here, and I think is really the deciding factor of this game, is going to be the red zone defenses. When you look at Tennessee, for all the struggles that they've had this season, they are the second best red zone defense in the NFL, allowing teams to score touchdowns on only 34.4% of trips. Jacksonville themselves struggle in the red zone. That's why I'm bringing this up here. They are 4th lowest in the NFL as far as turning red zone trips into touchdowns, getting in at only 43.5%, but Tennessee's worse at 32.1%. So while the opportunity to potentially pull the upset is there, especially if you're stopping Jacksonville in the red zone and forcing them to settle for field goals, and maybe you get a good, a lucky touchdown or two here or there at some point during the game. This feels like a Jaguars win, especially being at home. They move to 500 at home. They get themselves back in the win column. 7 victories for the Jaguars. I have them winning, tight contest, 20-17. Don't be too surprised if Tennessee can hang in there in this matchup, though. Next, we continued to talk AFC South action, but this time with the Houston Texans hosting the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals, another team that has yet to win a football game on the road. They are currently 2-8 and 0-5 on the road. Houston, on their side, 3-1 at home. I really like Houston in this matchup here. And there is a bit of a wild card factor to this one here. I would say that this game is harder to pick because Kyler Murray obviously changes the offensive dynamic of the Arizona Cardinals. So while I like Houston, I don't think it's as cut and dry as just taking Houston because they've been the better team overall this year. Both teams are actually countered fairly well by the opposing team's defenses as far as what their strengths are concerned. The Houston Texans, they love throwing the football. C.J. Stroud has been a menace for defenses to deal with. But the Arizona Cardinals, for a team that's struggled as much as they have, only 208 yards per game allowed through the air. That's 11th best in the NFL. So they're close to being a top 10 unit. And then when you look at what the Cardinals have done, they've kind of lived and died by the run all season long with pretty poor quarterback play. But now that Kyler Murray's back, I expect that to change a bit. But he's also a menace with his legs and clearly showed last week that he's not afraid to use those legs. He has I feel like there's a mental block that you sometimes get when you're coming back from leg injuries, especially as a quarterback or just a running back, anyone that uses their legs a lot specifically, that's part of their game. And Murray has showed next to zero of that mental block. He apparently very early on in his rehab process told himself, I'm going to come back and I'm going to still do exactly what I do and be successful the way I've been successful in my career. I think that the key for Houston to be successful in this game and come away with a victory, they generate a fair amount of pressure. 25.9% of dropbacks, they're getting close to the quarterback, and the quarterbacks are feeling it. ATL is about the same as far as their pressure rate, but where they failed last week against Kyler Murray was being able to contain him. If Houston can bring that same pressure, but keep Murray in the pocket and not let him escape the way Atlanta was at certain times during that game, they should be able to come away victorious in this. I expect Arizona to be as competitive as they have been in some of their games, if not more now with Kyler Murray in the fold. But Houston's riding a wave of momentum right now, coming off of 2 back-to-back excellent victories here. And I really firmly believe in CJ Stroud and him being an MVP candidate at this point. He is playing lights out, whether it's the numbers throughout the game or the game-winning drives that he's pulling off to win. You can't really deny what the Texans are doing right now. And the defense, for what it's worth, not really much of a slouch. They are one of the better run defenses in the NFL, a top 10 unit at that. Yes, they let teams move the ball through the air, but they make teams one-dimensional, and when you get into a shootout, CJ Stroud's been coming out on top so far. So I'll take the Texans, 25-21. Tighter contest. I think Arizona can compete, but right now, I really like the Texans in this one here. There are a lot of injuries that I'm a little bit concerned about. When you look at the questionable list for the Texans, it's a pretty long list. Arizona's also pretty long as well. So I really feel like this game also could be dictated based off of how many people wind up missing the game. But just looking at these two teams here, I like Houston. Now, moving into the late window, we're looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers look like they are back from their graves and ready to run amok over the NFL. I think they've heard everything that's been said about them during their 3-game losing streak, and they're going to show everyone just who they are and remind everyone that they are more than the 0-3 team that they were during that 3-week stretch. Now, when you look at this matchup here, as far as defense goes, and even some things on offense, scoring aside is the key to this little piece of information I'm putting out here. Pretty even. Both teams do a really good job protecting the football. Both teams are top 5 in pass protection. It really just comes down to, one, the Bucs can't run the football at all. Second worst in the NFL, 78 yards a game, barely in front of the Cincinnati Bengals. And 2, they can't really score. If they could score defensively, this is a really good team. And I think that their failures on just extending drives, converting on third down is really what's holding Tampa Bay back. And when you look at the way San Francisco and Tampa Bay operate, San Francisco scores on about 45% of their offensive drives, puts them at third best in the NFL. Tampa Bay is right in the middle of the pack at about 35.5%. So if Tampa Bay could just find their way into the end zone more, or even just get some more field goals on the board and sustain drives, this would be a closer contest. But I really like San Francisco, especially being at home here. Not quite sure how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers find a way to win this matchup. It will have to come down to the 49ers shooting themselves in their own foot. Maybe Brock Purdy makes a mistake or two here or there that really just breaks the back of the team. But I like the 49ers. I think they win fairly handedly as well, 29-17. They show everyone that, that 3-week stretch, losing, thing of the past. They're back to their winning ways. Now we'll look at the New York Jets and the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to preface this game by saying the first time that these two teams played, when Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be quarterback, I actually picked the Jets to win that game. I ultimately lucked out. Jets defense was as good as advertised, and they shut things down against Buffalo, forced a ton of turnovers, and kind of foreshadowed the issues that we were going to see from Buffalo throughout the entirety of the season, aside from like a couple of games. Both these teams dealing with a few injuries that I think are worth mentioning here. Will McDonald, Garrett Wilson, Mekhi Becton, all three guys, I think, important pieces to their defense right now. Offense for Garrett Wilson and Mekhi Becton, Will McDonald being a guy that's been finding some success lately. And then as far as the Buffalo Bills go, you have Cam Lewis, Christian Benford, Micah Hyde. Secondary is a little bit of concern there. Jordan Phillips, Dorian Williams, a lot of guys on defense. But the Bills have been injured on defense pretty much all season long and are still finding success shutting down opposing offenses. The Jets' offense has been awful to watch. I don't think that's really a secret. Don't think it's surprising anyone that I'm saying that. Buffalo, honestly, as of late, not much better. Like, yeah, they move the football, but then it's like a turnover here, a turnover there, and somehow this team isn't averaging 3 turnovers a game, even though it feels like they have 3 turnovers a game. They just fired their offensive coordinator, which I don't really know if you want to blame him for all the problems, but I will say that Joe Brady getting an opportunity as the offensive coordinator with Josh Allen and that offense over there is a bit exciting to me. I really feel like Joe Brady got scapegoated by the old Carolina Panthers regime and Matt Rule when he was fired from that offense over there, because I don't really think he was the problem. It was Matt Rule. Obviously, he's not there anymore, and that has kind of sorted itself out since then. So I'm happy to see that Joe Brady's getting another opportunity in a far better situation, but that turnover issue has got to be solved. The Bills are turning the football over on 17.3% of their offensive drives. That is horrendous. Horrendous. Second worst in the NFL, mind you. And this is a team that a lot of people had pinned as a Super Bowl favorite going into the season. The best way for Buffalo to get back on track and take care of this Jets team that, again, offensively has been a nightmare to watch, they've got to run the effing football. They have to. They absolutely have to. I'm tired of seeing Buffalo. And I even went back on this a few weeks ago because I thought, maybe it really is just let Josh Allen do his thing. But it's getting to the point now where we're even seeing successful running from Buffalo, and then they still go away from it. And then it turns into an interception, or it turns into a poor play here or there. We need to see a more balanced and committed team from the Buffalo Bills. So I'm kind of doubling back on what I said a couple of weeks ago, but this was my initial feeling that I kind of flipped on, and I'm going to go back to and feel like, you know what, I was kind of stupid for flipping on it initially. This has always been my feeling with Buffalo, and it's been like this for a few years now. You need to commit to running the football and get the weight of Buffalo off of Josh Allen's shoulders. You are not going to beat this Jets defense passing the football. They have one of the best passing defenses in the NFL. They are third best in yards per game allowed at only 169. That is ridiculous in this passing age of the NFL. Not to mention that the New York Jets bring pressure on basically 30% of all dropbacks they face. 30%. And they are the second lowest team at sending a blitz at only 17.2% of passing plays. They blitz the least, or just about the least. They're only behind Indianapolis. But bring the most pressure in the NFL. They can beat you with 4 guys and let the remaining 7, and even sometimes just 3 guys, and can still bring pressure and beat you with 7 or 8 guys dropping back, which makes it impossible to throw the football effectively. You need to run the football. This Bills defense has been great all season long, despite the inefficiencies of the offense and kind of putting them in really tough spots. They can handle the Jets. Offense simply cannot turn the football over, and they simply just can't drop back and throw the football. Drop back and give it to Josh Allen. Josh Allen needs to make a play. We need to run the offense through Josh Allen. No, he is a very big part of the offense. Do not get me wrong. He's very talented. You've got to establish a run game. And if you're finding success on the ground, which against the Jets, who are allowing 138 yards per game, that's 31st in the NFL. There is a clear weakness in this defense. Attack it. Attack it. And if you see success, stick with it. Josh Allen does not need 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. We need a good game from Josh Allen where he's not turning the football over and the pressure isn't all on him. Help your quarterback out. He's one of the best in the NFL, but he needs some help schematically. Bills win 23-17. They should get the job done here in Buffalo. I firmly believe that. If they lose this game here, there are a lot more problems than just Josh Allen's turnovers. Next game, Seattle Seahawks and Los Angeles Rams. This is one I'm actually really looking forward to because Matthew Stafford is back. We have just a few questionables on both sides. Both teams come in relatively healthy for this matchup. And the last time these two teams played, the Rams won 30-13 very handedly. For whatever reason, the Rams match up very well against this Seattle Seahawks team. And I'm actually a little bit concerned about Seattle coming into this game here. We saw the way they struggled a bit trying to put away the Commanders last week, and something tells me that we might see a little bit more of that this week, and it being in LA might be a little bit of an issue for the Seattle Seahawks. And now I know LA isn't necessarily the most daunting of home field advantages right now, but the Rams, having won a Super Bowl, feel like they do have a little bit more fanfare over there than when we're talking Chargers home games, excuse me. I personally think that this game, they match up really well. Like when you look at the numbers here, Seattle, they do score a little bit more per game at about 22 points a game to the Rams 20, but that number is kind of degraded a bit because they haven't had Matthew Stafford in recent weeks. But defensively, you're allowing about 23 points a game for the Rams, a little bit closer to 22 for Seattle. Passing yards a game, literally both at 231. As far as defensive yards per game through the air are allowed, Seattle actually allows about 238 to the Rams 217. Rushing yards per game, the Rams, a little bit better than the Seattle Seahawks, 104 for the Rams, 99 for the Seahawks. As far as run defense goes, Seahawks have a slight edge, 116 yards to the Rams, 122. These teams are very evenly matched up. The turnover differential, definitely a little bit better on Seattle's side, but again, we've been dealing with a Rams team that does not have their starting quarterback for the last few weeks. When you look at third down, though, in sustaining drives and keeping the football away, which was kind of how they found success the first time around with the Rams beating the Seahawks the last time they played, this is where this game could kind of be won and lost here. When you look at Seattle's offense and kind of some of their struggles this season, on third down, they're only converting at about 31.5%, third worst in the NFL. But when you look at the Rams, even though that they've been missing Matthew Stafford and their offense has been not great the last few weeks without him, they're converting on about 42.1% of third downs. They're actually 10th in the NFL. That's a top 10 conversion rate right there. And then when you flip it and look at defense, the Seahawks just let teams move on third down. They have a very hard time shutting things down. They are the second worst third down defense in the NFL, allowing teams to convert on 45.5% of their third down attempts. Rams defense, a little bit better at about 41%, 21st in the NFL, both bottom tier teams, but the Seahawks obviously a little bit worse. There is a clear path for the Rams to be victorious in this matchup here. They can attack the Seattle Seahawks secondary and find success, and I think they might just do that. There is obviously a big difference in Leonard Williams being in the middle of that defense, and I'll be curious to see how the Rams deal with that because he was not there the first time around these two teams played. But I think I'm going to go Rams on this one with an upset victory. Seattle's been concerning me a little bit as of late, and yes, their record is 6-3. I understand that. The Rams are 3-6, but the first time these two teams played, it was, and again, that was a while ago, so these teams vastly different at this point, but there was a very clear mismatch that was in that first matchup, and I don't quite know if that mismatch was figured out or solved since then by Seattle, and I think the Rams could pull off an upset victory here. So give me the Rams, 22-20, tight contest. I don't know if they're going to score as many points this time around. I think the Seattle Seahawks defense might hold them a little bit more. Maybe they're a little more prepared for things, but I think a motivated Matthew Stafford with Cooper Kupp in the fold now, and if Puka Nacua winds up playing, could pose a little bit of a problem for Seattle. Looking at Sunday Night Football, the Josh Dobbs train continues to chug along against a surprisingly hot Denver Broncos team, coming off of 2 straight wins against the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. I've got to say, did not expect to be talking about Denver like this a few weeks ago, but here we are, and I'm here for it. I like to see teams be competitive. I don't like to see teams getting absolutely dog-walked like the way they were earlier in the season, so I'm glad to see that Denver is finding some success and becoming more competitive. Minnesota going into this game, though, big road warriors, 4-1 on the road. They're riding a 5-game winning streak right now. That is unbelievable. In that 5-game winning streak, they are 4-1 on the road. That is, or not 4-1 on the road, but in that 5-game winning streak, they've been winning on the road is what I'm trying to say here. I think that there's 2 matchups that really decide how this game plays out. First one being how Minnesota's front handles Denver's offensive line. When you look at what Minnesota's been doing, they've been pretty good against the run, allowing only 98 yards per carry, and the run game has kind of opened things up for Denver a lot through this season. They're 12th in the NFL as far as rushing yards is concerned. So with that, and also Denver allowing about nearly 3.5 sacks per game. They're 6th most in the NFL right now, just under 3.5. The technical number is 3.33. But they're allowing a fair amount of sacks, and again, they're going up against a pretty good run defense at that. So Denver's offensive line holding up against Minnesota, definitely one key thing to keep an eye on. The second thing I'm looking at here is how Josh Dobbs fares against the secondary and just the pass defense overall of the Denver Broncos. The Broncos have been allowing about 243 yards per game this season, which is 23rd in the NFL. They're one of the bottom tier teams, and there is a lot of talent as far as receiving threat goes in Minnesota. Josh Dobbs has been proving that he is a legitimate starting quarterback to this point. He's had some really good games, and he is a nightmare with the way he uses his legs. I will be very curious to see how this game plays out. Vikings are actually underdogs in this game, and I believe it's only by like 1 point or something like that. But I think I'm going to go Minnesota in this game here. It's always tough going to Denver. Mile High Stadium, air's a little bit thinner, easier to get gassed, but Josh Dobbs is a literal brainiac. Like that's not even a hyperbole. He's a literal brainiac. The dude he does stuff with NASA. Like the guy is a rocket scientist or whatever the actual term is. He is a genius, playing the quarterback position as well as anybody else has this season. He's just been on a really poor Arizona Cardinals team, but now on a talented team that is on the cusp of getting Justin Jefferson back. He might be able to play this week, might not. We're kind of watching that. Really hoping that we do see Justin Jefferson return, though. That would be amazing for the Vikings in this matchup. I'll take Minnesota, and I have them winning 26-20. I think their defense gives the Broncos some problems. It's not like the Broncos have really been lighting up the scoreboard this season. They're only averaging about 22 points a game. Minnesota allowing about 21. I could see the Vikings stealing a victory in this matchup here, taking advantage of a Broncos team that has allowed a fair amount of points per game this year. So give me the Vikings, big upset win, but I like them on the road here. Road Warriors at 4-1. Give me the underdog. And then finally, Monday Night Football. The Kansas City Chiefs host the Philadelphia Eagles in a Super Bowl rematch from this past February. The Chiefs are 4-1 at home. The Eagles themselves 4-1 on the road. You cannot ask for a better Monday Night Football matchup. Both teams coming in fairly healthy. Nakobe Dean going to the IR is probably the biggest thing to keep an eye on as far as the Eagles are concerned. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, questionable as far as the Chiefs are concerned, but there's really not a ton of injuries to keep an eye on as far as recent injuries, I should say. When you look at the way these two teams match up, they're getting it done in different ways. Philadelphia, third best scoring offense in the NFL right now, putting up about 28 points a game. Chiefs are sitting at about 23. They're sitting at 13, so about 10 teams behind. Then you look at points allowed. This is where the Chiefs dominate. Only 16 points per game allowed this season, second best in the NFL to the Eagles, who are sitting at about 22 points a game themselves. When you look at how this matchup is kind of sorted out and the way these two teams stack up against each other, their defense's strengths, complete opposites, and then their defense's weaknesses are their opponent's offensive strengths. And I think this is going to lead to a very fun contest here. When you look at them defensively, the Chiefs right now, 176 yards per game allowed through the air, fifth best in the NFL. The Eagles, though, they love to shut down the run and force their opponents to be one-dimensional. 66 yards per game allowed on the ground this season, best in the NFL. But then, like I said, their defensive weaknesses just so happen to be the strengths of their opponents. When you look at the way the Chiefs get it done, they get it done through the air. 264 yards per game. They might not be scoring as many points, but Patrick Mahomes is still moving the football with his arm the way he always has. And the Eagles, they let teams move. 257 yards, per game allowed through the air. And then on the flip side of things, Eagles love to run the ball. They're averaging about 130 yards a game, eighth best in the NFL. When you look at the Chiefs, they're about middle of the pack, allowing about 112 yards a game. The way I see this game, again, who do you like more? Who do you think's the better team? I have the Eagles at number 1 in my power rankings. I have the Chiefs at number 2. These two teams are separated by hairs. They get it done in different ways, but they are both very successful in the way they get it done. This is the lone game that I've done this season where I've went into the pick and not had a winner decided beforehand. I usually decide all my stuff as I prepare everything, and then I tell them to you guys as I go through. I don't have a winner picked out here or a score picked out here because I really do not know who's going to come out victorious. So I'm making this decision literally as I'm talking to you guys, and I'm having a very hard time picking on this one because I don't know who's going to win. The Chiefs' offense clearly taken a bit of a step back. And when you think about how things played out last year, the Chiefs did allow about, 35 points? The final score was at 35, 30, 38, 35? I forget what the exact number was, but it was a high-scoring 30-plus point affair from both of these defenses as far as points allowed go. If the Chiefs' offense has taken a step back, are they going to be able to keep pace if things get out of hands against Philadelphia? But then on the flip side of things, with the Chiefs' defense being clearly far better than they were last year, can the Eagles' offense be as dominant as they have been throughout the entirety of this season? And does that even end up being an issue for Kansas City? Do they wind up not even having to worry about keeping up with them because their defense can hold down Philadelphia? I really don't know who the favorite is in this matchup here, and I don't know how you could confidently pick either one of these teams because, again, they both have just completely different strengths and weaknesses, and the way they're going to attack each other is pretty different on both ends. But I think as far as who I'm going to settle on, I think I'm going to go Kansas City. Them being at home, finding ways to win in unlikely situations. I know they had a really ugly loss to the Denver Broncos a few weeks ago, but it feels like the Eagles are due for another loss at this point. I've been going with Philadelphia all season long, and they have only burned me once. I think I've only picked against Philadelphia. I don't think I've picked against Philadelphia once this year, to be completely honest with you. Or maybe I have like once. But I've been riding with Philadelphia for a bulk majority of this season. Same with Kansas City. But at some point, Philadelphia is going to run into somebody who's got to be able to knock them off. I think it's going to be the Chiefs this week, especially being at home. I'm gut feeling on this one. I'm going to go Kansas City. Final score. Give me Kansas City 28-26. Tight contest. Coming up just short. Maybe a missed field goal at the end for Philadelphia or something like that. Very tight affair, though. I don't think anyone runs away with this game, and it's going to be a grind to the finish line. You know what? I'll lower the score. 24-23. Give me the Chiefs. 24-23. I like that a little bit more realistic. Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are as far as picks go this week in the NFL. Let me hear your thoughts on my picks. What am I getting right? What am I getting wrong? Would love to discuss with you on that comment section down below. But that is it for me. I appreciate you for making it to the end of the video if you did. As always, I will see you all next time. Have a good one.